Welcome, everybody, to Krystal, Kyle, and friends. I am in a very good mood myself, and ecstatic, I might say, and I'm very happy to welcome to the show, friend of the show, returning champion, Nathan J. Robinson of Current Affairs Magazine. Thanks for joining me, dude. I appreciate it.
Hey, Kyle. Good to be with you, especially this week.
I was going to say, couldn't have picked a better week. We are riding high. We are feeling good. The vibes are just phenomenal and through the roof. I don't know if you saw, me and Krystal posted a video on my channel yesterday where we went to our local wine store and picked the most expensive champagne on behalf of Abdul. We spent $95 for a bottle of Moet. It was fucking delicious. I also got a cigar. I was smoking a cigar, living like a king, just like basking in the joy. So how are you doing, man? How are you feeling?
I didn't get any fancy champagne, but what I did do was read all of the right-wing tiers. So I read Wall Street Journal op-eds, and I've read Fox headlines, and I just basked in their horror at Abdul becoming a United States Senate nominee.
Well, speaking of their horror, you actually gave Fox News quite a panic just recently. You went on Will Kane's show. I love the fact that they're now inviting you on. I love the fact that like they feel sort of like obligated to have socialists and lefties on now. I mean, it's been a long time coming. They should have had us on, but now they kind of have to. And I just wanted to show my audience, you absolutely busted up Will Kane, and it's glorious. So everybody take a look at that clip.
Nathan, good to have you on the program. Thank you.
Hello, Will. Good to be with you.
So, Nathan, look, I know because I've got notes here that say you don't want to endorse a candidate. But look, you're a socialist. You've got a fancy accent, which suggests you're not necessarily, at least originally, an American. You are also ascendant. The socialist, you're ascendant. How would you feel about Kamala leading the party in 2028?
Yeah, not good. You're not going to find much support for Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg or Hillary Clinton among the Democratic Socialists because these politicians represent exactly the tendencies within the Democratic Party that since Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, Democrats have been arguing against, right? They're associated with the deeply unpopular Biden administration.
Wait.
The Biden administration's line was...
What about they're coming to you, though? They're moving towards you. So like Pete Buttigieg talking about doing away with the Electoral College and packing the Supreme Court. Yeah. You're just saying it's just not enough?
Well, Pete Buttigieg is a former McKinsey consultant who adjusts everything he says on the basis of what his poll numbers are telling him. What the Democratic Socialists have said since 2016 is that mainstream Democrats have neglected working people's needs, that they have said things like the economy is good, but you just don't appreciate it. The Democratic Socialists say, no, actually, you're right about your economic frustrations. Let's talk about the cost of childcare. Let's talk about the health care. Let's talk about getting you into a union so you have better bargaining power with your boss. Let's talk about kitchen table issues that matter to working people.
Okay, so no Pete Buttigieg, no Kamala Harris, no Hillary Clinton. Not everybody who is even ascendant right now is at least in name a Democratic socialist. So like Abdul al-Sayed, he's rejecting the socialism part. We played that clip earlier. He says that's at least what he says. I mean, I think you and I might agree. His actions and policies suggest something else. So could you get behind a guy like Abdul al-Sayed, who's today in a primary in Michigan?
Well, I think he's pretty sincere about not being a socialist. He just doesn't believe in the kind of public control, level of public control of the economy that socialists do. But I think the real question for Democratic Socialists in 2028 is who aligns best with the priorities that we're talking about. And Abdul is running on Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All. Abdul wrote the book on Medicare for All. And that's what socialists care about, right? They care about getting people affordable health care. They care about strengthening unions. They care about tackling the climate crisis. So the things that Abdul is prioritizing are the things that socialists value, which is why I think he'll be a very strong contender.
Oh, but I hear you being a practical political commentator there. You're basically saying he may not be a socialist, but he's closer to a socialist than is Haley Stevens. And so I would have to assume as well that if you got to it in a presidential election, then if it were Pete Buttigieg versus Hillary Clinton, you'd do the same thing. You'd say, I guess I'm behind Pete Buttigieg. He's more socialist.
Well, I don't know. Pete Buttigieg versus Hillary Clinton, I would plead that that's not how things came out, that we had someone better than those two choices. I've written very critically about both of those politicians, but it would depend on who I thought was more movable.
It's interesting to hear you be practical in your politics, Nathan, when so many of the policies of the Democratic Socialist of America are patently impractical. I mean, this is my editorialization here, Nathan, but
Sure.
you're promising pie in the sky, ridiculous concepts like abolishing prisons, abolishing the police. There's no, not only is there no reality of you implementing these policies, but there's no, I don't even know that you really want them. You say them out of one side of your mouth to one audience, and you say something else to another audience. So it's like, it feels like you're running for student council in middle school.
Well, no, I think actually, Will, you just misunderstand how it works, right? So, like, every socialist has a dream, and the dream is that eventually we don't have crimes, you don't have to have prisons, right? You deal with crimes before they happen rather than after they happen by throwing people in cages. And then we have a practical side, which is you run for mayor. You have to fix potholes. And I think what you see in Memdani, right, is that when socialists are actually elected, they fill potholes, they improve bus speeds, he's building rest stops.
So you don't really want to abolish prisons?
He's expanding free preschool. You know, it's very, very practical things. When Bernie was the mayor of Burlington, right, he sort of focused on building affordable housing, on protecting the waterfront.
But I'm saying, so why are you saying these things like abolish prisons and defund the police? If you don't really plan on doing it, why say it? Why lie to your voters?
Because nobody's lying. Everyone's running on the exact kind of things that they're going to do, right? Mamdani ran on the things he was going to do, and now he's doing them. But socialism does have a utopian component that dreams that someday, you know, we're not going to have prisons.
But I would be careful, Nathan, because what you begin to sound like there is the very thing that you criticized at the outset of our interview. You sound like a Democrat who makes big promises that somebody else will come along in 5 to 10 years and say you never fulfill those promises. You sound like the exact same thing that you accused Hillary Clinton of being. And I'm saying the difference between you and Hillary Clinton is 10 years, Nathan. In the next 10 years, something more radical than you will come along and criticize your practicality.
Mamdani ran on a series of promises, right? Freeze the rent, free childcare. He's fulfilling the promises. So there's no broken promise. He's telling voters exactly what he's going to do. He gets into office, and now that's why you're seeing he has a very high approval rating, and most people in New York think the city is finally going in the right direction.
And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes, right? Like every other experiment in socialism. We'll see how that public-run grocery store goes.
I'm pretty confident.
Me too. Me too. Love to have you back along the way. Thank you, Nathan.
That was a masterclass, my friend. And allow me to say, I feel like many people, even people who you and I ideologically agree with, I don't have the highest praise for them in those kinds of formats. I think that oftentimes lefties are not punchy enough. They're not concise enough. And you have mastered the art of being punchy and concise. And that's like the most important thing when it comes to communication for lefties.
Well, I've learned a lot from you, Kyle. I mean, you and I represent a kind of school of thought on the left, which is that we have to be really effective at communicating our ideas. We have to think about how we're heard, how we're understood, and we can't be afraid. We have to. You've been on Fox yourself. You've gone into the viper's nest, and I think there used to be this kind of belief among people of our ideological stripe that, you know, the game was rigged against you, so you shouldn't go into these places because they're just designed to set you up and humiliate you. You and I have always felt, well, yeah, the game's rigged, but that's just an obstacle. You have to still go out and win it. You go out and you fight on their turf, you know, and you have one hand tied behind your back and you're at a total disadvantage, but you think about, okay, they're going to give me 60 seconds. You can't say much in 60 seconds. But what can you say in 60 seconds to make a socialist sound more reasonable than a Fox viewer would have thought they were?
And like I said, that was an absolute masterclass. I love how punchy it was. Every time he hit you with something, you were able to like break it down in simple terms so even his audience could understand. And it actually reminded me, last time I was on Fox was in 2018. They haven't invited me back since. But I was on a show. Well, pretty much. I mean, there was the show. Oh, I'm blanking on the guy's name now. He's a News Nation. Oh, Leland Vittert is his name. He was
They're all interchangeable.
It's so true. He was a Fox host. Now he's over at News Nation. But he used to have a show where the whole point of the show was like the right and the left come on. Theoretically, they're supposed to be like talk radio hosts. But like they come on, they fight with each other. And I'll show everybody a little clip of that back in 2018. Take a look.
Kyle, should moderate Democrats worry about this far left push?
No, I think that the far left is actually the way for Democrats to win, believe it or not. So when you look at the polls and you look at all the substantive policy issues, the American people overwhelmingly support Medicare for all, for example. They overwhelmingly support free college. They overwhelmingly want to end the wars. So when you go issue for issue, the American people are actually with the far left. And in fact, President Trump, when he ran in 2016, stole some of those issues. He ran against the wars. He ran against the trade deals. If anything,
and Kyle, you might have a point. He also said he wasn't going to touch any of the entitlements, Social Security or Medicare. You make a good point in terms of where the Democratic Party is headed.
So let's say the wealthy 1% could pay. Let's say if they paid, let's just give them 45%.
Kyle, is that the future of the Democratic Party?
I hope it's the future of the Democratic Party. Jeff Bezos has over $100 billion at the same time that we have 60,000 homeless veterans in this country and 400,000 homeless Americans. And the American people, again, to go to the polls, overwhelmingly want to raise taxes on the rich, overwhelmingly want to raise taxes on Wall Street and corporations. I'm talking about 58% of Americans. So if your strategy is to defend the rich, by all means, go right ahead.
We're still talking about radical fringe stuff. Abolishing ICE, abolishing law enforcement.
Abolishing law enforcement? Why are you making things up? That's made up. You just made that up. Who says abolish law enforcement? Yes, you did.
Well,
you just made that up. Who said abolish law enforcement? Nobody. You did.
Excuse me. Is ICE not law enforcement?
Customs and Border Protection already protects the border. ICE was created in 2003, and by the way, there are allegations of them literally doing slavery.
So, in that interview, I ended up defending abolish ICE back in 2018, and I thought it was a reasonable policy back then. But it's almost like at the moment, you don't even know how correct we are. Like, I feel like socialists. Over time, it's like even we're astonished about how correct we are in the long run, because now it's, ICE is a paramilitary Gestapo force that's committing like the most brazen crimes of all time right in front of our faces.
Well, I know there is a certain element of self-doubt that I think we should confess that as a leftist, certainly 10 years ago, climate is an example where we're all screaming our heads off and going, this is going to be a horrendous disaster. But part of you is like hoping that it won't be, right? When you're talking about the coming of fascism, when you're talking about, they're building a paramilitary Gestapo, part of you is like, I believe this because I've looked at what is actually happening and I've looked at history and I understand how it feels to be in a historical moment where these kinds of things happen. I understand a little bit how denial works, the mechanisms by which people avoid confronting the things that are in front of their noses. And so I believe everything I'm saying, but I still... it's still a nice day out. I still walk around in the street and they haven't built the full fascist state yet. So I'm like, well, maybe it might not happen. And then, all of the things that we're screaming are going to happen start happening and happening faster and faster. And now, with the climate crisis escalating, right, you're seeing all the droughts and wildfires across Europe. There's just a warning that with this year's El Nino, there might be mass starvation across the world. And you're like, oh, there's a good reason we've been warning about all this stuff for all this time. There's good reason that in 2018 you were going on and going, we have to abolish ICE now or it's going to become the president's personal paramilitary force.
Now, on that point, it feels like we're now finally getting our Tea Party moment. Like, I was a co-founder of Justice Democrats after Hillary lost.
Yes, you were.
And
another early Kyle prescient.
I always say though, we were just
I always forget this.
We missed our window. Like we were just before our time. Our time is now, and we were just a few election cycles early. But seeing Abdul win, and now you see the panic on the right setting in over that fact. So here's what Trump said after Abdul won, and I want to get your reaction to it. He says, "Great news for the Republican Party. El Sayed, a communist loser who hates Jews and Israel, is projected winner in his race with the socialist." So I guess he's calling Haley a socialist too. As usual, the polls were way off on this one. She was not expected to do nearly as well as she did. Now the Democrats' crazy policies will only get worse. So what's your reaction to Trump there?
Well, Trump actually has always, a little bit better than some other Republicans, understood the threat posed by the left. You could tell this with the way he talked about Bernie in 2016, where he kind of struggled to know how to respond. I mean, he's being very aggressive there, but I think he has always understood the same thing, actually, that you and I and other members of the progressive left understand, which is that, authentic, charismatic, populist progressivism is really the only thing that could work effectively against his kind of politics. He knows it. On some level, he knows this. And in fact, I interestingly saw J.D. Vance just warning about the possibility of a President El-Sayed. And I think, J.D. Vance is also, he's not totally stupid. He can see Abdul's victory, and he can think a few years into the future, and he can think about himself running in 2028, and he can think about what Abdul might say about him and what he might say about Abdul, and he can think about the fact that the things he might say probably won't work because all they have is like, you're an anti-Semite, you're a communist, you're a socialist, and you're a radical Muslim terrorist. I don't know if they have any others. I think that's about the set of stock phrases they have now.
My favorite part of the post is saying that he's a communist loser who hates Jews, but then also throwing in that he hates Israel, which is like, I think Trump is too stupid to know that the smear only works if you just say they hate Jews. Like, once you add in Israel, that like everybody goes like, yeah, I kind of hate Israel too. Like in typical Trump fashion, It's like he overreaches and accidentally makes a mockery of his own point. I also wanted to lay out for you some of these responses that I'm seeing from the right are like genuinely disturbing to me. Like Mike Rogers released like a super Islamophobic statement, a super Islamophobic ad, basically saying like, I fought Osama bin Laden and I never thought I'd have to run against somebody who was like on the side of the 9/11 terrorists. And it's like, oh my God. Here's another one that they're doing. A New York Post wrote this. Far left Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed took over $115,000 from members of alleged Hamas-linked group. Okay.
Yeah.
What the group they're talking about is CARE, the Council on American and Islamic Relations. It is literally the biggest like Muslim civil rights group in the country. And this is standard operating procedure. Imagine there was, a Jewish group and the Jewish group was called like, genocidal freak maniacs or something by the left. No, we got to like walk on eggshells when talking about things. And the right just gets to say the most bigoted, over the top, insane, racist claptrap you've ever heard. And this stuff, like, my question for you is it landing with average voters? I know the right-wingers are going to do their right-wing thing, but will average voters see these attacks and think there's there, or will they go, this is missing?
Well, we're only 2 days now into the general election, so I think we're going to find out whether this works. But I don't know if you were surprised by this, but I was actually a little surprised at how quickly they came out and just went like, he's Osama bin Laden.
Right.
And I thought, I don't know if you want to try that, because most Americans aren't actually deeply bigoted. I don't think. I think most Americans, if you put up Mike Rogers saying this guy's a Muslim terrorist, he's Osama bin Laden, and then you put up Abdul saying, I want to lower your healthcare costs, I want to address the cost of groceries, I want to end pointless wars, and all this guy has is I'm a Muslim. I think people assumed that Barack Obama would never be president because they assumed that America was a deeply bigoted country that just couldn't set aside, its prejudices. But I don't know that that's true. I think, in fact, if Mike Rogers is really going to go the my opponent is a Muslim route, I think he's setting Abdul up for exactly the campaign he wants, right? Which is that Abdul wants to say, all my opponent has is my name. I just saw him doing it. He just did a speech where he's like, he's going to talk about my name. I'm proud of my name. I love my name. I was an Abdul in Michigan, and Michiganders are tolerant, wonderful people. They've always embraced me as an Abdul. He can appeal to the better angels of Michigan. And then he said, I want to talk about the issues, and he wants to talk about my name. So I really feel like I think it's a little unwise for Mike Rogers to just shout Muslim and communist, because I think that appeals to like 30% of people, and that the majority are actually going to be really primed for the way that Abdul is going to counter that. We'll see.
Yeah. Me and Krystal were talking about this as well, and I don't know, I'm torn with how Abdul should respond. He could do what you described, which is like go right to the substance and say like, I want to lower your costs. He's just smearing me because I'm Muslim. Fair enough, but part of me also wants him to go a little deeper and basically say what I said on my show the other day, which is every time these people talk about Al-Qaeda, it should be pointed out that Trump pardoned a guy who laundered money for Al-Qaeda because that guy bought his crypto coin. You know, I mean, there's also Trump bragged about putting the new president as the head of Syria, and that guy used to be a leader of a branch of Al Qaeda. And then also, I mean, again, if you want to talk, you want to hurl around accusations of terrorism. If I'm Abdul, I'm saying Mike Rogers and Donald Trump, you guys are terrorists. You bombed a little girls' school in Iran, killing 160 or 170 little girls, and then afterwards you said it was okay. So, to me, that's the philosophy of like when they go low, we go lower. Versus what you described is sort of like a high road type thing.
It's true.
I know it's true, but you know when you point those things out, it seems like it's dirty politics, but it's accurate. You know.
Yeah. Well, Abdul is definitely going to go negative on Mike Rogers. I assure you of that, because he has said explicitly, I think New York Magazine the other day had an article where they go, how are you going to run against Mike Rogers? And he goes, I am going to essentially tattoo the words corporate shill and caused the opiate epidemic on that man's forehead. And by the end of this race, the only things that anybody is ever going to think when they hear the name Mike Rogers is Mike Rogers caused the opioid epidemic, and Mike Rogers never saw a corporate check he wouldn't take. So,
and I think Abdul also said, when they go low, we take them to the mud and choke them out or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, he's got the same philosophy. But it's funny because he says that, but then most of the time I hear him talk, he actually does do. He pivots back to substance. And to be fair, that's worked to this point. It's worked completely. Yeah. Like the number of times he brought up, let's stop sending money to Israel to bomb kids and let's fund our healthcare here and let's raise your wages here. I'm not sure there's a single time he was asked a question where he didn't pivot back to that. And it got to the point where I said to Krystal one night, I was like, I don't know, I think you should throw in a couple other lines too about how, like, you know, Haley Stevens has cucked herself to Trump and voted to allow Trump to do war against Lebanon and all this stuff. But then Abdul proves me wrong, because every time he opened his mouth and said that, they did on the street interviews with voters in Michigan, and one of them literally just repeated verbatim all the stuff that Abdul said, like it was their original thought. They were like, "Oh yeah, I voted for Abdul because I want to spend the money here. I don't want to spend the money
in your pocket." Right? I mean, I know. So Abdul's done this since 2018, because I went out to Michigan in 2018 and watched his speeches, and I followed him around for a weekend, and back then, he did the same thing where he has lines, and the lines just repeat over and over and over. And if you watch a couple of these speeches, you're like, oh my God, oh yeah, here comes this line again. And then, you know, if you're watching this campaign, he's like, money out of politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all. I mean, but I think he learned from Bernie, just like Mamdani learned from Bernie, because Mamdani could pivot every question to, we're going to freeze the rent. And, you know, it works because you repeat the thing over and over, and human psychology is just, oh, well, unfortunately, now you've drilled this into my head, and every time I think Abdul, all I can hear is money out of politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all, money out of politics. And I was just like, but it totally works, because then they did like word clouds.
Right.
Oh, people had heard about Abdul and Haley Stevens. Haley Stevens, it was just AIPAC. And then Abdul, it was like Medicare, money.
Yep. and by the way, also to your point, it's not like everybody's us where we're watching everything these candidates do. So we've heard it 78,000 times. Right. They might watch one debate or see like a couple ads or whatever, and that line stuck with them because it resonated with them. So I mean, I think he's a bit of he's politically phenomenal in the same way that I think Zoran Mamdani is like a unique political talent. He's charismatic, he's good looking, but also his message is amazing. And you see this now freak out where they're trying to attack him by proxy, where now they're like going after Hassan because Hassan and Abdul campaigned together. So Stephen Miller was on Fox News and he said this, quote, "In El Sayed, you have somebody who courted the endorsement of this heinous, deplorable, monstrous Hassan Piker. To have someone running for Senate who's going to associate with that kind of evil." So the irony of Stephen Miller calling somebody evil, like, so is this as hollow as I think it is, right? Like, is it like preaching to their little bubble, which now only makes up about 30% of the population, by the way?
We're going to find out, right? We don't know how well this is going to work. What I have said is that people who see those polls that suggested that Abdul would lose to Mike Rogers and Haley Stevens would maybe narrowly win are underestimating Abdul. If you watch the interview, I think Abdul did with CNN, where he said Democrats don't need to worry, they need to work. Abdul understands that he has work to do in the campaign. And I think what people don't understand is that Abdul is out there organizing and responding to the need to actually win the election. So he's out there having meetings with all of his volunteers and developing a strategy. And they're going to have, they're going to schedule all these events. He knows it's an uphill battle, just as he knew it was an uphill battle against AIPAC and Haley Stevens. And he won because he spent like a year and a half putting in the work that got him over the top. So people who are looking at those polls don't understand that between now and the November election, like, Abdul is doing work. He is holding events. He is going out and meeting voters. He is organizing an army to go out and knock every door and say, what have you heard about Abdul? And they say, well, I hear he's a pretty radical Muslim terrorist. And then the volunteer says, well, let me tell you what he did to rebuild the Detroit Health Department. Let me tell you about the time he gave all poor children free glasses. Let me tell you about how he tested the schools for lead. Let me tell you about how he reduced infant mortality in the city of Detroit. And so they're going out there every day and telling people those things. And the question is, are they going to be able to pull that off? Because there's going to be AIPAC now, of course, is going to switch its loyalty immediately from Haley Stevens to Mike Rogers. And they're going to blast all these ads saying, basically, Abdul cheered 9/11. That's what they're going to say.
That's exactly right. Now, with the media, like I see this all, and we'll talk about the centrists in a second too, but you see the media also now sort of, not just right-wing media, but centrist media attacking Hassan and by proxy trying to hurt Abdul with that. I kind of feel like it might backfire in the sense that, almost in a Trumpian way, the fact that the media couldn't shut up about Trump, it kind of helped Trump in 2016. Like, he was just the one that was the most interesting, so people followed him. I kind of feel a similar way about Abdul, that he kind of sucks all the air up out of the room, and when people are talking about even like trying to smear him, it just redirects back to, here's what Abdul is actually saying. Here's what he's actually focusing on. And people listen to that and they go, I don't know, this guy seems kind of reasonable in a way that they're like not portraying him. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. And Abdul clearly thinks that's true, because if you noticed, Abdul didn't just campaign with Hassan early in the cycle. He literally campaigned with Hassan on the last day of the primary, which is like a deliberately provocative act, right? It's just like giving him two middle fingers. And I think Abdul's theory is like, let me wave Hassan in front of people so that they go nuts about Hassan. And I then can say, look, all they want to talk about is this streamer guy who supports me, who, I want to talk about. Here's what I want to talk about. I think he's doing it deliberately. I think he really does think that having them talk about Hassan is not hurting him at all, that it only helped him.
And also, like, there's a lot of this is like rage bait of the right, where like they're trying to get Hannity and all these right-wing hacks to melt down and overreact and lose their mind. And it sort of makes it so that the dividing lines are clear, right? So anybody who's mad at Trump and Republicans and MAGA and Fox News in this moment, it's almost like an instantaneous reaction where you see whoever they're mad at, you go, well, I like those people now because we're so negatively polarized against the right. So it's almost like the rage-based strategy is almost purposeful. And I feel like it's a very modern media type thing that a lot of Democrats still don't get, that like just the attention in and of itself might be helpful in a way where in the past you would think, oh no, Hassan is very controversial, this might backfire. Now it's like, hey, people are talking about you, and it's the right-wingers who are trying to attack you, which means by definition, everybody left of center is going to love you. Like, it's very modern media type, new age strategy. And like you said, I think Abdul truly is doing it on purpose.
I think he wants them to run an Islamophobic campaign. I think that's his ideal, is that they just shout terrorist, because he thinks that won't work. Abdul we mentioned that he does pivot to the issues pretty well, but the man provokes them on purpose. I mean, when it was quoted that Mike Rogers said, "I think we're in good shape," Abdul said, "Mike Rogers hasn't been in good shape since the 1990s." Like, he said, I'm going to leave pieces of Mike Rogers scattered all over the state. And I mean, like, if you're trying to avoid the, like, you're a violent terrorist, he said, but politically, I'm going to leave pieces of him scattered all over the state. But he doesn't play it safe, right? I mean, he says things that as you say, rage bait, right? He wants them to start seeing red, going crazy, lose their friggin' minds, and start just babbling and just sounding. And I think Mike Rogers is Trojan horse ad. You saw the AI slop ad where it's Abdul coming over the Ambassador Bridge from Canada in the communism Trojan horse with AOC and Bernie Sanders as Odysseus. Abdul's like, I mean, it's terrible. It's really, like, bad. It's a bad ad. It just sets Abdul up to look like a hero, right? He's all muscular.
This happened with Hassan too. They did a clip on Fox News.
Oh, yes.
It was put together by some Fox producer, and it looked like a pro Hassan hype reel. But it's like, no, it wasn't. This is like they're trying to attack him, but they don't know how to make it land against the left in a way where they know how to make it land against the center.
Yeah. My favorite thing is when Fox always puts up, like, the radical left agenda on the
universal health care, free college, and the wars, living wage, disgusting. Yeah,
I've done this like 5 times, and they still. I swear, some of the producers, some of the backstage people at Fox have got to be secret leftists, because I think there is some undermining of the hosts going
Absolutely. On. That's what it seems like. So let me ask you this, like. So we talked a lot about the right here, but we got to talk about what I think is fair to call the collapse of the center, because you have, I mean, such a dominant force in American politics for so long. I mean, Bill Clinton comes along in the early 1990s with the DLC, and it's the full neoliberalization of the Democratic Party. They basically half agree with Ronald Reagan, and they give in on, like, all this economic stuff. And that has now led to today, where every flavor variety of Democratic president had some neoliberalism in them up to this point. And now it feels like the center can't hold. Something is fundamentally breaking because people are struggling too much and they're looking for answers in extreme positions. That's why you have the rise of the fake populist right and the fascists and Trump, but now you're also seeing the rise of democratic socialists on the left. I think it's a wave that it's going to be hard for them to beat back. But you see people now they're trotting out the desperate arguments. So, like, James Carville did an interview the other day, and he said, quote, "Why do these people call themselves Democrats? Call yourselves democratic socialists. Don't call yourself Democrats. Basically, there's no place for you in this party. Go start your own party." What's your reaction to that?
I thought they didn't want us to start our own party. I thought they hated third parties because they were spoilers, and they said that you have to run in a primary, and you have to, if you want to win, you have to come and join our party and beat us within the party. I mean, they don't want you to exist, right? I mean, James Carville is ideologically opposed to democratic socialists, so he would like them to go away. So they'll use whatever argument it actually translates to, I would prefer that you didn't exist. So, you know, he doesn't, it's not that he's actually recommending they go and start their own party. He's just upset that a wing within the Democratic Party is defeating him. That he's screaming in rage because he's so used to being a Democratic Party kingmaker, and he is realizing that he is becoming totally powerless. Ironically, because a man who was once wise, James Carville, said, "It's the economy, stupid," in 1992, and all of the socialists are the ones who are taking seriously the thing that James Carville said in 1992, which is that if you want to win elections, you talk about the economy.
Carville is 81 years old, okay? And I remember after the 2024 election, Carville had a moment of honesty where he said, look, Bernie was actually right about a lot of stuff, and we need to acknowledge that. I remember him saying that. It was a big moment. And, you know, everybody was sharing it far and wide. But the thing that's weird to me is that, so you admit that about Bernie, but now we have Bernie Sanders-style candidates winning all over the place. And now all of a sudden you say, it's me or them. I can't be in the same party with these people. And I look at that and I say, well, what's the difference between Bernie and these people? And let's be honest, it's the fact that the people winning these elections are young people of color. So he's not comfortable with Zoran. He's not comfortable with Abdul El Sayed. And I really think he's kind of telling on himself. I don't think he knows that, the bigotry is part of this, but I think it is. Do you agree with that?
Well, do you remember he had that comment about how there are too many mouthy women in the Democratic Party?
I don't remember that. That's crazy.
he said the Democratic Party has become dominated by all of these women, and it's very strange because James Carville also had the op-ed in the New York Times, which is the Democrats need to roll over and play dead.
Oh my God!
Remember this? Where
to be fair though, Nathan, I always said if the Democrats did that, they're still going to win the midterms. But the point I make on top of that is, but if you actually fight, you win the midterms by more. So he's not wrong. He's just not realizing that you should actually believe in something and fight for that thing, and then you'll do even better. But I still think the Democrats will win by would still take back the House, even if they said and did nothing because Republicans are so atrocious.
But you got to, in the long run, you have to stand for something because otherwise you're locked in. We're never gonna vanquish the right unless you have an alternative, right? You're gonna get locked in this cycle where Americans elect the right-wing president who's a catastrophe, and then they go back to the Democratic Party, and then they remember that the Democratic Party is also dominated by useless people who do nothing, and so they go back to the Republicans, hoping that will be different, and then we have 5-second memories, so they are reminded that a Republican president is also a disaster, even more so. And so then they vote, you're just going to be locked in this cycle forever and ever and ever. And we are never actually going until maybe a fascist takes power. So the thing is, there's a kind of clock ticking here until a successful fascist says, both of these establishments have failed you. I will redeem the country. Just give me absolute power.
I think that's right. And it's terrifying.
So you can win the midterms, and then what happens in 2 years, then what happens in 4 years, then what happens in 8 years.
And of course, to your point, when you look at FDR, for example, when he took power, he eventually ended up with 80% of the House and 80% of the Senate, and he won 4 presidential races. This is before we had term limits. And that speaks to the power of if you're on the left and you actually rep left-wing positions and you deliver for people. Of course, there were horrible things too, because at the time, race politics were atrocious. So you got the Japanese internment camps, all sorts of racism, of course. But the point is, on economic issues, it was, let's do the New Deal, let's actually tax the wealthy and give that money back to regular people. And that led to a generation. It defined a generation of American politics, right? And they almost needed to backdoor in the neoliberalization because you couldn't win on the merits an argument with somebody who's on the left, who wants the government to actually do good things for the people.
Well, it's interesting that you said they can't win an argument on the merits. That's why I think that I don't know if Fox knows that it's not really a good idea to let the socialists talk. One of the ways that they have kept us from building power is that nobody ever hears from us because there is the manufacturing of cassette, right? We're just kept off of the air. So if you never hear a socialist in an argument, it's possible to demonize socialists very, very easily. But what you have been doing over the past, when did you start on YouTube?
2012, full-time 2012, yeah.
Good Lord. Yeah. So, and then Current Affairs started 2015, 2016, right? We've been building our own independent media channels. There's just a big AP article about, and I think it cited breaking points as, examples of these outlets that are now giving candidates like Abdul more of a chance to connect with audiences that they wouldn't have had before. And when you let us speak and when you get us in debates, people realize that we're actually pretty reasonable, which is why the smarter right-wingers don't debate us. Right? they hide because they know, like Ben Shapiro knows if he ever debated a socialist, like, or if he ever debated if he ever debated on Palestine, like
yeah.
Russian equality on Palestine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he would just the depth of his ignorance would just be so immediately humiliatingly exposed. Or Norman Finkelstein, right? Like, can you imagine Shapiro in a room with Norman Finkelstein who would give him, who would get his name wrong 10 times and just give him, so it's a smart strategy not to let socialists on Fox News. But now we built enough power to where they have to pay us attention and they have to fill airtime. So they bring us on and they hope if they just confine it to 60 seconds. But me and this other socialist, Monty Mader, went on News Nation about a week ago as well. And I'm real pleased, especially with what Monty did, because Monty was so good on the Israel-Palestine stuff that they shut down the segment.
Oh my days.
It was great. We went on and they gave us like 3 minutes, but we were prepped and we were ready and we knew everything they were going to ask, and they just couldn't get out of that segment what they wanted to get out of it.
It's funny you say that, because Krystal was on News Nation on Leland Vitter's show, and they debated. This was early on in the genocide, and they had no idea that Krystal was like so anti-Israel
really
and like she was going to call out the genocide, and you could see the panic in Leland Vitter's eyes. And then Breaking Points covered that segment after, and News Nation got more views than they ever got in their entire history, and everybody was making fun of Leland. So you're 100% correct in your analysis.
Can you ask me a question here, because you have personal knowledge of this? Why do politicians not look up Krystal before they agree to interviews? Are their staff just like Adam Smith, Alyssa are they not aware that she is very smart and will destroy them? Like,
so
what's going on there?
So I actually have answers to this. So for Alyssa Slotkin, she thought she was going on a show. Like her team told her, oh, it's a show that has like a left-wing point of view and a right-wing point of view. And so like they're sort of open to all ideas. So you'll probably fit in there and you could, do your centrist thing or whatever. She didn't really understand that it's not like a normal left-right show. It's like, like Krystal's like a democratic socialist, and Sagar's like a populist right guy who now knows Trump is full of shit and actually somewhat believes in the populism part of the right. So she didn't understand what she was getting herself into. Adam Smith is interesting because he had just voted against that provision, some provision that was, I think it was the one that was supposed to mesh the Israeli military with the U.S. military. So he voted against that provision, and his staffers brought to him the idea of going on Breaking Points. And I think his staffers thought, oh, he'll go on Breaking Points and he'll be smart enough to like play to their audience and be like, oh yeah, I had this transition on the issue of Israel. I don't want the U.S. military and the Israeli military to come together. I don't want to fund Israel anymore. And so his staffers thought he can use this as a stepping stone to like connect with the younger audience. But obviously he got on there and he wanted to hyper focus on the disagreements he had with Krystal and with democratic socialists more broadly. So basically my point here is it stems from their ignorance, and it stems from the staffers expecting one thing and then them stepping in there and getting something totally different.
I bet there were a few people chewed out after those interviews. Like, people
probably
do not understand that you cannot pull that kind of bullshit on Chris. I really do think like it should be a condition for being elected to American public office that you first have to survive an interview with Krystal.
Bro, my favorite was when she said to Alyssa Slotkin, like, how do you sleep at night? when talking about her votes to give Israel more money and weapons during the heart of the genocide. She was like, how do you sleep at night? Like, this is disgusting. Like, it's the most deplorable thing I've ever seen. Let me ask you this, because now it's really heating up with this Abdul win, but you have a lot of powerful moneyed interests that are now saying, oh no, it's on like Donkey Kong. We're declaring war on the left. So there's this article that just came out, I think it was in the New York Times, and the headline is, Moderate Democrats prepare for war against an ascendant left. One moderate group, says the progressive winds are deeply troubling and is planning a $15 million effort against democratic socialism. And then they go on to say, quote, we are preparing for the next war that is coming, said Jonathan Cowan, the president of Third Way, a leading centrist democratic group. By the way, I love how they say, at a time where there's an actual illegal war of aggression aggression that we're waging against Iran, the war that they want to wage is against the left, the people who are trying to stop the actual illegal war. What's your reaction to that? And do you think they'll have any more success than the tens of millions of dollars that AIPAC spent trying to take down Abdul?
Yeah, I mean, good luck. Good luck. They had, but isn't it interesting that the news headline is they have it's always like a $15 million campaign, a $30 million campaign. All they have is money. The only thing they have is spending. They don't have a strategy for. They don't have a set of ideas that they think are going to effectively counter it. They really do think that they can counter it by just buying American politics. That's what AIPAC thought in Michigan. They thought, okay, we're just going to throw it. If it's not working, put more money in and put more money in until it was the most money they had ever spent in a race, not noticing the money is backfiring because you don't have any ideas. I mean, when I was in Michigan, I saw it over and over on television there. Every television you turn on and every ad break was the anti-Abdul ad. And they had one ad that they aired. And the ad was Abdul disparages women. And the examples were ridiculous. He once wrote an op-ed where he said that Michelle Obama's anti-obesity campaign didn't fix juvenile obesity. And they ran millions of dollars of targeted Facebook advertising at every voter in Michigan, specifically targeting Black voters and women, saying Abdul disparaged Michelle Obama because he said she didn't actually fix juvenile obesity. So they didn't have anything. They had nothing. The only thing they had was giant sacks of money. Right. And that's clear in the third way thing, too. It's like, what are you proposing? How are you going to address the problems that the progressive successes are arising in response to, right? Mamdani, literally his campaign was devised based on having talked to lots of New Yorkers and listened to what their primary concerns were. And the number one was always, I can't pay my rent. I don't think I can afford to live in New York. Every single person, I can't afford to live in New York. So what did he do? He came up with lots of ways I'm going to make it more affordable to live in New York. You're not seeing Third Way do that. AIPAC certainly doesn't do that. All they do is be like, well, let's just set more money on fire. And the other problem is that a lot of this money, and we saw this in the Kamala Harris campaign, because these institutions are so corrupted by people who don't really care about anything, they're just there because it's a well-paying job, a lot of the money does get set on fire, right? A lot of it goes to this consultant class who are producing presentations and commercials, but they don't really believe in anything. They're just collecting very, very lucrative paychecks. So I wouldn't be surprised if lots of that $15 million of Third Way money just essentially dissipated into thin air.
What do you make of this argument that a lot of this is kind of like age determinism too, in a sense, because the millennial generation is very solidly on the left because of everything we went through in our lives, the Iraq War, the Great Recession, it's been disaster after disaster. Yeah. And now it's, millennials, we're not that young anymore. We're the people who are almost solidly middle-aged now. Then you got the generation behind us, which is also kind of has similar politics to us. And so there's almost this, I don't want to overstate it, but there's almost seems like an element of inevitability that we were going to start to get more Bernie Sanders type candidates, because Bernie Sanders has always been the kind of politics that our generation has had.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is something to that. I do think a lot of us were just radicalized by circumstances, and now we're getting older. And also, the crises are going to continue to radicalize the next generation of young people, right? Because the climate crisis is going to get worse and worse and worse, right? It's going to get hotter every summer, and there are going to be more droughts. People's houses are going to burn down. They're not going to be able to afford home insurance, right? There's going to be cascading crises, and I don't think we're going back to a third way centrism of 1996, right? I don't think Bill Clinton's going to be coming out and playing the saxophone again, because those vibes are gone, because that country is gone. And so it's not inevitable that we'll win, because you have to fight in order to win. And Abdul could well have lost, right? I mean, that was so It was 15,000 votes. And I talked to people who were there in Michigan, knocking doors every single day for weeks and weeks and weeks, and all people had heard was that Abdul was a sexist. That was the only thing they'd heard about him because of this campaign. And so his volunteers were like working so hard to find every voter who had only heard that Abdul was a sexist and get literature into their heads and be like, Abdul was the former public health director of Detroit. These are the things he did. These are the things he stands for. These are why the reasons why they're trying to destroy him. And they succeeded by the skin of their teeth of countering all of this money. So it isn't at all inevitable. I would never use that word. But it is true that we have this incredible possibility based on the fact that the democratic socialist message has a ready audience of people because they know that everything we're saying is true because they see it in their lives every moment.
Yeah. Did you see that it may be the case that Haley Stevens got as close as she did because of Republican voters? There's some reason to believe that because they have the open primary system in Michigan, not much going on the right, and the average voter age of the people who voted in the primary was higher than what was expected. And so you have data guys and polling guys who have speculated that it could be there were a lot of Republican voters who voted in the Democratic primary and supported Haley Stevens.
The polling guys have something to answer for here because, of course,
that's what explains the gap, right? Like every poll had Abdul up 10 points to 18 points, very solid lead, and then on election day he ended up winning by less than a point. And you need to explain that. And this is one of the explanations that was given is that Republicans voted in the Democratic primary and voted for Haley Stevens.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that would make sense if there's evidence that that's what happened. Because there definitely something needs to be explained. Because unfortunately, the fact is that this was an incredible triumph against overwhelming odds, right? Because he was so outspent, because the entire establishment, including the governor of the state, including the incumbent senator, including, Chuck Schumer, everyone was lined up for Haley Stevens. The amount of money poured in was just enormous, and he still won. But because of the polling error, it was seen as like, well, he, almost a disappointment, which is kind of crazy because it's such an incredible victory. So they need pollsters that account for every factor that is going to affect the elections in Michigan in future.
Yeah, it's hard to account for a lot of these things because Haley overperformed with white rural voters. And Abdul actually overperformed with black voters relative to what they expected. So everybody expected Abdul to get like all of the voters who voted for Bernie in 2016 and 2020, these rural white voters. But again, he underperformed with them and he did better with black voters than they expected. So it's just hard to sort of map out exactly. You never know until election day. You just don't know until election day what's actually going to happen,
It doesn't surprise me that he overperformed with black voters because I talked to people on the campaign and they knew that they needed to win over black voters. So they were working, they had a huge effort in Detroit to get out and talk to people and try and talk to them about the ads that they were being blasted with all the time. And, I was hearing stories of voters going, oh, so that none of that's true. And they were like, no, none of that's true. This is what's true. And they're like, well, that doesn't seem very fair. They're like, no, it isn't very fair. And people go, well, I guess Abdul's my man then.
Totally.
So that's again, it's the result of a ton of work that was put in.
Nathan, I wanted to ask you about the collapse of MAGA and what you make of that. I mean, in your mind, is it the Epstein files? Is it the fact that prices are through the roof? Is it the illegal war against Iran? Is it the fact that Trump sort of violated his promises? What's the biggest factor in your mind that is leading to this implosion of MAGA, where Trump's average approval number is 36%? His average. The low one I saw was 30%. This is like unprecedented how much he's hated right now.
Yeah. Well, the answer to your question is yes. That those things are the reason MAGA is collapsing. But the answer that captures all of those things is that Donald Trump was always going to be exposed sooner or later as a fraud because you can't get away with bullshit forever, right? So Donald Trump's strategy has always been, and I don't do his voice, I'm not even going to try. You do a fantastic
I'll do it
Trump.
for you, Nathan.
But his strategy has always been to just tell people that something totally different from what is actually going on in front of them is going on. He's telling them that actually they're doing amazing. America is in the greatest shape it's ever been. The war is coming to a close, and it works for a little. You can gaslight people about this with just your pure Trumpian charisma and confidence for a little while, but eventually people have to notice that the war is still going on. You can't just go like the war is wrapping up and then 6 weeks later go, yeah, it's still wrapping. Like even Donald Trump can only gaslight people to a certain extent, and then his voters are going to go, okay, but the Epstein, but you didn't release it, right? He's like, we're going to release the Epstein files. We're going to release the Epstein files. Okay. Well, there comes a certain point where he's like, all these people talking about the Epstein files. And you go, no, you said you were going to. So
right.
there does come a point where reality just runs smack into his bullshit, and the kind of scales fall from people's eyes, and they start to go, maybe it's just a little bit at first, but like gas prices are a number. They're a number that shows on a screen in front of your eyes every day, right? There's a big sign that says the number. You drive by the sign. So even Donald Trump, his special magic of manipulating reality through confident bullshit, like, has to end at a certain point. That's the reassuring thing about our times.
and there's no faction of the right that is anywhere close to making sense or trying to solve problems. So I got a good example of that right here. Dan Crenshaw, who's typically viewed as like a MAGA skeptical Republican, he's had his issues with Trump, and he posted, quote, "Just hearing about this dumb $20 burrito debate, so just thought I'd make the losers on social media angry before going to bed." And so here's his reaction to Americans complaining about high prices. He says, quote, "Stop whining. Get a job. Eat ramen like the rest of us did in college on a budget with 4 roommates. The market doesn't care what you think something should cost. Only communists care."
Well, do you remember when Donald Trump said you might have to have only $2 instead of $30?
Yes, yes. He literally said, "I don't care about Americans' financial situation." Remember that?
He said affordability is fake. I love the inflation. But the dolls thing was very telling because I'm like, well, someone who has $30 might hear that and that sounds so well. But what if someone has $2 right now? Like, what if someone's like, well, I can't afford $2. So, like, are you saying that I will have, like, if the person who would have had $30 has 2 and I'm the person with $2, where does that leave me? That leaves me with nothing.
Yeah.
You're saying you will have nothing and you will enjoy your nothing. And that is what Dan Crenshaw is saying. He is saying, like, by the way, do you remember how well this message worked for Biden? Do you remember how great it was for Biden?
Good, yeah. Mm-hmm.
When all of his people said the problem is that Americans just don't appreciate how good they have it? Do you remember how angry that made people because people don't like to be told your suffering is an illusion and your president is great whether you like him or not?
Right. Well, I mean, my question for these people is, why are you involved in politics if you fundamentally don't want to make things better? I would say that to all these Republican politicians, and I'd also say that to the neoliberal Democrats. It's like, if your answer on everything is there's nothing I can do, I mean, then what are you doing in politics? If you look at a guy like Zoran, he's actually delivering on the stuff that he said he was going to do. He's actually freezing the rent, for example. He's getting childcare, for example. He's raising taxes on the wealthy. I mean, just get out of politics if you don't want to make things better and you feel like the government can't do that.
He filled 100,000 potholes,
That's right.
From little things to big things. And he's, pissing off all the business leaders. The Wall Street Journal just had they were just furious because he said Mamdani reduces corporate influence on city agencies. And they're like, because it used to be that like panels of business leaders would get together to advise on important decisions. And he's just throwing them off all the panels and replacing them with like ordinary members of the community. And of course they're apoplectic, but if you're an ordinary member of the community, you're like, oh, okay, so I now have a voice in the things that affect me. And Zoran's going, I care about the things that affect you. So this is why socialists are winning. And it's why they're going to continue to win, because as you say, people, if you want to run the message, Medicare for all and money in your pocket versus the market doesn't care what you think things should cost, suck it up and get a job and eat ramen like a college student. I don't know about you. I don't think it's gonna work.
Totally. All right. Final question, Nathan.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on what ends up happening with the Iran war? Because I've been looking at this thing 17 ways to Sunday, and my takeaway is, like, literally the best we can hope for is for Trump to effectively surrender and just give Iran the terms that they want, while turning around and then lying and pretending like he won.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
that's the best
right.
we could hope for, because every other alternative is terrifying. Every other alternative is like the cornered animal does some cornered animal shit and drops a Moab on Iran, or uses nuclear weapons, or tries to take Karg Island, or does some stupid, invasion. So what do you think is going to happen?
I don't know, because Trump is very unpredictable, so I try not to predict the future on things like the Iran war. I mean, I agree with you that is the best case scenario. Obviously, there is no way. This is like Vietnam. You are running into the fact that you cannot, in fact, win this war, that all the U.S. air power in the world is not going to change the fundamental dynamic of the conflict, which is that Iran has the ability to control the strait, and the United States does not have the ability to stop them. That is the fundamental fact of the war, and also that you cannot change the Iranian regime through air power. You're not going to do it. You're just not going to do it. And so we either accept that fact. The other alternative, so there's the escalation alternative, there's the surrender agreement and then lie about it alternative, which is what we sort of saw with the memorandum of understanding. Yeah. And then Trump became convinced that actually he could win the war because he won't accept defeat. So one of the reasons one of those things won't happen is because men like Trump, like the idea of being humiliated and losing is like you would rather destroy the entire world than admit that you have lost and you were wrong. Like, I really do think Donald Trump would kill every person on earth before he would ever say, I was wrong about that and I'm sorry.
Nathan, he can't admit he's lost a golf tournament. Never mind a war.
Yeah, but then the other thing that might happen is happening, and it could go on for indefinitely, because Vietnam kind of did this, is just, you bomb them now and again. It just sort of and hopefully, Afghanistan did this for like 20 years, right? Is that like we're still at war, but Americans just don't pay attention, and some things happen over there. Nothing is ever declared. Nothing is ever resolved. It's just a situation of horrible violence and deprivation for the people who are caught in it. And that lasts until a United States president comes along who's willing to take the L, as they say, and get out.
And by the way, we're running out of long-range ballistic missiles, and we're down 80% of our interceptors. And so now the point that experts like Robert Paper making is, he's just going to go to dumb bombs now instead of the smart bombs. So now you're going to see, if he continues this, very, very high civilian casualty rates. And so we're really in a terrible situation. I mean, it really is kind of amazing when you go back and look at all the stuff Trump said about war, where he pretended like he was anti-war. He would go after the Iraq war. And then now you look at him. I mean, he is George W. Bush on steroids. I mean, this is like astonishing. This is exactly what everybody in this country didn't want. And here we are. Let's spend billions of dollars on some illegal war against a country that didn't attack us and wasn't a threat to us. Meanwhile, as Abdul points out, we have 18 million people that got kicked off Medicaid in this country. Now they have no health care. We got 4.5 million people that were kicked off the SNAP program. They don't have food stamps.
Didn't Trump have some quote or somebody near him about how, like, we might have to do some cuts to Medicaid or something because we got all this
He said we can't afford daycare, we can't afford Medicare, we can't afford Medicaid because we have a war. And it's like, yeah, well, you made that happen. That's you.
Your war that nobody wanted, and that was the most unpopular war from the start. And of course, you were warning people for a long time. Trump's anti-war stuff is all fake.
Bullshit.
Screaming it. Nobody listened. I keep saying this. Isn't it kind of funny that there are Americans who think we could win a war with China? Like,
bro, it would be over so fast. Oh my days. I'd be speaking Mandarin in this bitch right now. You would be speaking Mandarin.
You couldn't win a war with Vietnamese peasants who didn't have shoes. You couldn't win a war with the Taliban in the mountains of Afghanistan. You couldn't win a war against Iran despite sanctioning their economy into oblivion. You can't win a war. Stop waging wars. You're not going to win.
Iran was preparing for this war when Donald Trump was redlining against black people and not allowing them into his apartments in 1985. When Donald Trump was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, Iran was preparing for this war. And so to your point, there's no way. I mean, we're fighting a war. We're preparing for war like it's 1985. Like, that's what we do. We throw a whole bunch of money at our military, and then, the executives take that money and they buy a yacht that puts a yacht inside of their yacht, and it's a slush fund. They're stealing a bunch of it. The Pentagon can't account for 63% of its money, but they're building these super expensive weapons that don't work that well. And then on the Iranian side, they have Shahid drones that are $20,000 a pop that they have an infinite amount of, that they're refreshing at an incredible rate. And they have Chinese intelligence on top of that, so they know exactly where our soldiers are. The only reason why we don't have a massive U.S. ship that's at the bottom of the ocean right now is because Iran has decided to not attack those ships yet. They could have casualties, U.S. casualties in the thousands right now if they wanted to. They've chosen not to do that.
Yeah, well, they're actually trying to fight a war. Our military budget is, as you say, like in large part graft. It's the large part a jobs program for contractors. And we discover this every time we go to fight a war. Then we're like, why is our military so ineffective? And it's like, well, because the structure of this institution that you've built is a money funnel to private corporations. And nobody has an interest in destroying it because it provides a lot of jobs for a lot of communities. A lot of people suckle at the teat of the military-industrial complex, so we don't want to build a military that can actually fight a war. But as a result, you should probably not wage a war, because you should probably confront the reality of what your military budget actually is.
That's exactly right. Nathan, thank you for the conversation, man. This was awesome.
Always fun.
Everybody, go subscribe to Current Affairs, the YouTube channel.
Listen.
Also, get the magazine, man. We have the magazine, and we love it.
You're going to be in it, Kyle. We're getting you in it.
Hey, man, and I'm excited for that. So really looking forward to it. Everybody go get Current Affairs magazine. You sign up to the YouTube channel, sub to the YouTube channel, Current Affairs. All right, we love y'all, and we'll talk to you soon.